Well, hi there, food friends. It's Kevin, and welcome to Cavalcade of Food. And this is another edition in the ongoing cookbook series, which brings me back into the Cavalcade Cookbook Library and to share some of the quintessential vintage cookbooks with all of you. And I love hearing always after one of these videos about cookbooks that your mother used, your grandmother used, maybe cookbooks that you got as a gift for some occasion in your life. And I think we all grew up identifying with a cookbook or maybe a couple of cookbooks that we saw all the time. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the Good Housekeeping cookbooks. And I think those of us of a certain age certainly are very familiar with Good Housekeeping, primarily the magazine, Good Housekeeping, which is still in print. The first issue of Good Housekeeping actually was published in 1885. This magazine has been around for a long time. I think it was maybe about 10 years later or something like that it became a monthly magazine. And around 1911, I think it was, the Hearst Corporation, William Randolph Hearst, who of course was a newspaper magnate here in the United States. Hearst Corporation bought Good Housekeeping back in 1911. They still own it to this day. So I think a lot can be said for the longevity of Good Housekeeping magazine. I know it was one of the magazines that my mom would read, that and Better Homes and Gardens. But there was a whole slew of magazines in that period that were really focused primarily for women and the life of keeping a house. I'm thinking of, Better Homes and Gardens, Good Housekeeping, McCall's, Women's Day, Family Circle, Red Book. I'm probably forgetting a few. But anyways, and they all had cookbooks, by the way, and we'll get to those, because one of the things that were featured in these magazines, including Good Housekeeping every month, was recipes. And it's still part of the repertoire of Good Housekeeping magazine is to publish recipes. Some of us might also be familiar with the Good Housekeeping Institute, which came out of the Good Housekeeping magazine. And the Good Housekeeping Institute sort of started as sort of a kind of a laboratory where they kind of tried things and tested things and stuff like that. But in 1910, they actually established the Good Housekeeping Institute as a way of testing recipes and testing consumer products of different kinds. Raise your hand if you know about the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, which is still in use to this day, where it says Good Housekeeping Approves. It's like an oval symbol, and a lot of us grew up with that as a part of the reason why certain things got purchased. I know it influenced my own mother if she saw the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval on something that actually really meant something to her. And the Good Housekeeping Institute, when it opened, it had three areas. It had a model kitchen, it had a testing station for household devices, and a domestic science laboratory. And over the years, they added more sort of parts to the Institute to test and try and develop different things. But understand that the Good Housekeeping Institute actually played a role in a lot of advancement in food safety and product safety. So it wasn't just there to sell stuff. It was actually there to ensure that things that were being sold were actually what they said they were doing. And some of you may know that, in the early part of the 20th century, they were putting all kinds of stuff in food. I mean, stuff that you would not want to ingest. And things were, going out of the factory that were spoiled and all of that. Well, there were a lot of sort of early consumer protection agencies and institutes that looked out for what these big companies were putting out there in the stores. And the Good Housekeeping Institute was one of these institutions that helped to really ensure that the stuff we were eating and drinking and using in our home was safe and good. So, it was a really necessary part of sort of the evolution of mass production of consumer goods and food products. So let's talk about their cookbooks. So of course they were putting recipes in every magazine, and it kind of made sense to do a cookbook. And early on, the first cookbook came out in 1925, and then there was a couple other editions. One was and the next one was in 1933. These cookbooks were sent directly to subscribers of the magazine. So Good Housekeeping had a huge subscription service in the millions by the 1960s. And so, but early on, their cookbooks were really available to their subscribers, and then they became more broadly available. I don't have any of those super early editions, like the first edition and the one from 33. I don't know that I've actually seen them, and I don't know how large they are or even what they look like, to be honest. But the earliest one that I have is this one from 1927. So this is fairly early. I mean, this was like 2 years after the first one came out in 1925. Good Meals and How to Prepare Them. A Guide to Meal Planning, Cooking, and Serving, the Good Housekeeping Institute. Catherine A. Fisher, director of the Institute. And it has right here on the front, tested and approved by the Good Housekeeping Institute. And it's got this red and white checkered cover, very reminiscent of, a red and white checkered tablecloth, a gingham tablecloth. And so funny that this predates the Better Homes and Gardens cookbooks, which when they it wasn't until the 40s that they came out with their red and white checkered edition of their cookbook. So something about the red and white checkered look that I guess just screamed kitchen or recipes or cooking or something, because you see it in a number of cookbooks. Okay, so 1927 is our first one. And the contents include fruits, drinks and beverages, eggs, milk, cereal, cheese dishes, meat, poultry, game, stuffings, fish and shellfish, vegetables, chowders, deep fat frying, sandwiches and hors d'oeuvres, pies and pastries, salad, salad dressing, frozen dishes, icing. And then all kinds of information about table service and how to set a table. Look at this. I have to tell you that setting a table properly, nobody cares anymore. It's kind of too bad. But there's a way to really properly set a table in terms of where the dishes go, the order in which the silverware is done, where the glasses go, where the coffee cups go. I know. Young people are like, what difference does it make? But those of us who remember, especially if you ever went to someone's home and they got out the fine china, it was a special occasion or a holiday, a properly set table, it really meant something. I'm kind of sad that we've gotten away from that. We don't even eat at a table much anymore. The new houses don't even have dining rooms because people just have to eat in front of the TV, which I won't go on a tirade about that. But anyways, look at that. And all these other household hints, all kinds of charts for quick breads, sweet breads, right there. And again, this is fairly early on in kind of cookbook publishing. I just happened to turn to the chapter on pies and the page with pies with custard fillings. Yes, please. Caramel custard pie, chocolate pie, lemon pie, orange pie. God, they all sound great. Anyways, here is a very early, and my earliest edition, a very early edition of the Better Homes and Gardens Cookbook, 1927. Okay, from that, the next one, you can see the cookbook really gets expanded. I'm going to pull out two different copies of the same book. One of them's quite ravaged, but this is a 1942 versions of the Good Housekeeping Cook Book. Let's take a look at the covers. This baby this one here has been through the mill. It is literally falling apart, which I always say is a sign of a good cookbook. But, and it is filled with loose pieces of paper, magazine articles. Make your own Easter egg with chocolate. Here is two recipes written in pencil on white bread for white bread, and it's right next to the Good Housekeeping recipe for white bread, which includes 2 cups of bottled milk. Bottled milk, okay. So, anyways, this cookbook literally falling apart in my hands, but boy, was this good. And this has sort of a checkered plaid cover. Now, for some reason, in 1942, you also have this version. They're the same book. One has a red dye on the outer page, and this one is green. And I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that green ink and green dye was in short supply during the war. I'm guessing here. I don't know. And so, and I say that because there was a very famous example of how Lucky Strike cigarettes came in a green package up until the war, and because the pigments and dyes used for making the green packaging in Lucky Strike was needed for the war effort, the Lucky Strike packages went to being white, and their motto was Lucky Strike goes to war. So I don't know if they decided they needed they couldn't use the green, and so they came up with this, or what. But if anybody knows, sure there's an interesting backstory of why there's 2 covers. But anyways, here we have on the inside a beautiful photograph of a very, very well set buffet table. And you can see from the previous generation of the books, it's bigger. I mean, it's large. There's way more pages, about 3 times as many, and it's just a physically larger book. And it covers very much a lot of the same areas I want to show you something. Look at this. There's a photograph of, looks like a prime rib of beef to me. Now, people may look at that and say, ooh, there's a lot of fat on that. Yeah, there is. And you know what? Meat used to be sold with a lot more fat on it than it does now, because we have gradually over time insisted on a lower fat diet, which is good. And so in the processing of the meats, they trim so much more of the fat off of meat now that, you know, you only get a little bit of fat with the meat. You got to have some fat in terms of getting the flavor of the meat and keeping it moist, but the amount of fat is greatly reduced than what it was. This is 80 years ago, okay? So you would see a lot of more fat on the meats. But this one has really a fruit juice cocktails, chowders, bisques, and soups, and then it's got, you know, the standard chapters. They put fish and shellfish in 2 separate chapters. A lot of baking in here, pickling, sauces, and it is a much expanded version here. Not a lot of photographs, however, but again, just on the inside covers, you'll see a few things. So this is 1942. Okay. Then we go through the war and we come out of it, and this is 1949 edition. Now, it probably had a jacket over it. I call this the mushroom edition because it's got a little mushroom right there, the Good Housekeeping Cook Book. And on the inside, we have a new photograph. We have a garden harvest here. And it was not unusual. I mean, so many people, especially during the war, of course, but even after, kept vegetable gardens, even if you had a small yard and a little land, because we have to remember that from the 18th century to the 19th century, we went from being a very rural agricultural culture into being more of an urban industrial culture. So you had a lot of people who grew up on farms, and they know how to they knew how to grow things, and would often keep a garden. So again, here is the Good Housekeeping cookbook from 1949. Dorothy B. Marsh, food editor of the Good Housekeeping Institute, and you will see her name really through the 40s, 50s, even into the 60s. Dorothy Marsh was the editor of the Institute, and so her name is the one that appears on the cookbook. But, you know, these aren't necessarily, certainly her recipes. She just sort of supervised the cookbook. And again, like Better Homes and Gardens, which was a magazine as well, there was a test kitchen, and these recipes were tested and over again. So I think as a cook, you could use these recipes with a fairly good amount of confidence that they would come out if you followed the instructions. I always tell people who say, they say, Kevin, I can't cook. I just can't. Yes, you can cook, okay? If you can read, you can cook, okay? That's why we have recipes. That's why we have cookbooks. This is why we learn. This is how we learn things. If you can read, you can cook. You have a little determination, and not everything comes out perfect the first time, but I'm convinced that anybody who really wants to cook or bake can do so. And if you can read, you're on your way, because we've got recipes. Anyways, I just opened up to chicken tetrazzini. Kind of fancy for 1949. Chicken with herbs and casserole. Creamed chicken. I'll take any of those right now, please. Thank you. Terrific. Anyways, this is the Good Housekeeping 1949 edition. All right. Now we're going to move into the fabulous 50s with this one. This is the 1955 edition, complete with these really fun mid-century modern, what we're calling it now, illustrations on the cover. Kind of interesting they went with a black cover, but black, red, and white. It enabled them to do a two-color print job, which was probably less expensive than a four-color. But again, this cookbook was a little bit of a different size than the previous generation. But by 1955, I want to say, I think they were thinking of this cookbook was kind of the rage. The Betty Crocker, okay? Which, of course, there was the loose leaf edition, the ring binder edition, but this hardcover edition was a popular one. And I think that maybe they kind of were competing a little bit with that. But they did expand it. Again, not a ton of photographs in here, but edited by Dorothy Marsh, director of the Institute, and an expanded table of contents. New chapters here include cocktails, nibblers, cook's vocabulary, a definition of terms, which now you see in cookbooks all the time. Amazing. There's some terms, especially for new cooks, that are unfamiliar, like braising. You know, what is that? Well, they tell you in the cookbook. Pressure cooking, rice and macaroni, homemade candies, wines, marketing, jellies and jams, leftovers, casseroles. We're in the 50s, folks, okay? Casseroles are kicking it out. Box lunches, treats for children, the bountiful barbecue, cooking for one, cooking for two, cooking for a crowd, your weight, serving meals, and your kitchen. I love how, again, these books just give you all kind of information. Here's a random page I turned to. Look. So, you see this here? All those squares and circles with the lines? That's how to cut a cake. That's how to cut a cake to get a certain number of pieces out of a cake. You're making a cake, you're having a party, there's going to be 12 people to serve. Okay, just randomly cut the cake? No, there's actually a way you can cut the cake to get 12 equal portions, or 16, or 20, whatever the case may be. And this book will show you what that looks like. So really, it's just amazing the resources that they put in here. Anyways, and again, beautiful. I love these beautiful photographs on the inside of the cover. Okay, so that's the 50s. Now let's go to the 60s, the swinging 60s, and here we are. The Good Housekeeping Cook Book. This was a very, very popular edition. This is 1963, if my memory serves. Yep. A lot of times you see this without the dust jacket. I'm going to take the dust jacket off so you can see. It's got a blue, kind of a canvasy cover on it. Sometimes you just see it like this. A lot of times these dust jackets did not survive. But this really was a popular book. It says a completely new and revised edition of America's favorite cookbook used by more than 1 million women, and I'm sure a few men. Over 3,500 recipes, each kitchen tested by the Good Housekeeping Institute. Again, you know what? that gives you some confidence. Dorothy B. Marsh, the editor. So here it is in 63. This book now has a lot more color photographs throughout. Let's just look here at the table of contents. Good beginnings, dips, dunks, nibblers. When he carves, a chapter for the man on how to carve the turkey, the roast beef, whatever it might be. The macaroni family, vegetables that say more. Delectable yeast breads, let's have sandwiches to sauce the dish. Dreamy desserts. Oh, sweets to make for the cookie jar. And then here is up front cook's vocabulary. And, you know, again, well, there's braise right there. But braising is, their definition, in a little hot fat, brown meat slowly and well on all sides. Season, add a little water or other liquid. Cover, simmer over low heat until tender. Okay, that's how we make a pot roast, folks. It's a braised. So, blanching, basting, okay, grating, kneading, grinding. Okay, this is great. Anyways, okay, the 1963 edition. Then we got, I think we're into the 80s now, just barely, 1980. The Good Housekeeping Illustrated Cookbook. So now you can see larger still, and it is illustrated, literally, with just hundreds and hundreds of photographs. And here come the recipes for apple banana crunch pie. Anyways, and illustrations throughout the book. Boy, here is a stained recipe. No bake cookies. Well, I'll tell you what, she made this a few times. Look at this thing. Boy, they're probably really good. Anyways, lots of recipes. Spinach salad dressing, walnut cherry delight. I love these little loose recipes are always great. But anyways, and just beautiful. And it's a nice big book. Let me keep my originals in here. You know, this was somebody's go-to, obviously. They thought enough to keep their own recipes in here. So that was 1980. Now we'll get into the mid-80s with 1986 edition, the new Good Housekeeping Cookbook. And look right up here, a big gold seal. Limited warranty to consumers, good housekeeping promises, replacement or refund if defective. So it says America's favorite cookbook, now completely revised and updated. The #1 basic cookbook for a new generation of American cooks. More than 2,000 step-by-step recipes tested in the Good Housekeeping kitchens. Attractive, easy-to-follow layout. Microwave recipes. Okay? Yeah, we're in the 80s. Microwave. Calorie counts, nutrition information for each recipe. Total preparation and cooking time for every recipe. Helpful tips from the editor's kitchen. And more than 100 quick menus plus menus for all occasions, published by Hearst Books. And so this is quite a, what are we on? Beans, rice, and other grains. So cassoulet, vegetarian bean bake, tabbouleh, polenta, kasha. We're in the 80s. And then finally, this is the latest one that I have. There have been ones published since then because this one is already 2001. Hard to believe that's 23 years ago. Do you guys remember when we flipped the century and what a big deal that was? That was 24 years ago already. Oh my gosh. I can't believe how fast time is flying away. Anyways, here's the 2001 edition of the Good Housekeeping Cookbook. It's got the Good Housekeeping seal there, which they updated, and you know, it's very reflective of the, you don't see the big cuts of meat with all the fat on it in this book, let me tell you. Oh, here's one of my recipes that I must have saved, or a bookmark. And let's see. It's really very contemporary of the time. Herb roasted potatoes, all kinds of salads and salad dressings. This is a nice cookbook. I've used it many times and just fun to look at. So, 2001 is the latest one I have. Okay, now, just for fun, if those of you who are watching this series remember, I did one about the American Woman's Cookbook from the Culinary Arts Institute. And the Culinary Arts Institute, in addition to their cookbooks, published a lot of these little small kind of pamphlet or magazine style cookbooks that were sold like at the supermarket checkout and in bookstores and things like that. Well, Good Housekeeping, again, part of a large publishing corporation with access to printing presses, distribution, and everything else, also got in the game around the same time that the Culinary Arts Institute was selling their little pamphlet cookbooks, because nothing brings on competition like a little success. And the Culinary Arts Institute was fairly successful in selling those pamphlets, so Good Housekeeping got in on the act. And here, these are from 1958. They came out with a series of little pamphlet cookbooks. Who's Who Cooks. This is a collection of recipes from famous people. Kate Smith, Alfred Hitchcock, Catherine Forbes, Gladys Rockmore Davis, an artist. Some of these people I don't really know. Denise Darcel, a French actress. Anyways, okay. Then we have one here, vegetables. The 10 p.m. cookbook. So this is what things you can prepare when you come home from the theater or that cocktail party late in the evening. You don't want a real heavy meal. Salads, pies, meat. Ooh, the hamburger and hot dog cookbook. Fish and shellfish. And the beauty of these books were, for Better Homes and Gardens, a lot of these recipes were coming out of their cookbooks. So they didn't have to come up with new recipes for these. They just repackaged them. Smart. And if you were just looking for certain kinds of recipes, like here's one, egg and cheese and spaghetti and rice. Well, if you really love pasta and eggs and cheese dishes, you know, maybe you didn't have the big cookbook, but you just picked this up for 29 cents, 39 cents. Book, here's one, desserts, cookies, company meals and buffets, the casserole cookbook. This is a good one here, the cake book. A lot of good recipes in here. I've used this many times. The Around the World cookbook, a little international flair. The appetizer cookbook. Breads and sandwiches. Now these actually have a price sticker on them, 39 cents. That's how much they were. 39 cents. And let me double check the date on here. 1958, yep. These were all from 1958. And if you wanted to, through the magazine, if you wanted to order the whole set, all of them, you could get it in a binder like this. Now, this used to have a front cover and a back cover. Long gone. When I found this is all that there was. All the booklets were in here, but it only had the spine. But anyways, the Good Housekeeping Cookbooks collection, and it starts with appetizers and ends with, what's the last book? The Who's Who. And it goes through the whole thing, but it contains all of them. You had them all in one spot. There you go. Good Housekeeping, 1958. So yes, a magazine, an institute, a cookbook publisher, and without a doubt, part of the American cooking and culinary scene for over 100 years, Good Housekeeping. And so, anyways, another one. We've got a lot more to look at as we go on with this series. I hope you're all enjoying it, and I'm enjoying sharing these with you, and I appreciate you watching very much, and if you're so inclined, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It does help us out. As well, I'm going to tell you what that website is. If you want to get into Cavalcade a little bit more, you can go to cavalcadeoffood.com and see all the things that I've got going on, such as it is. And please hit the like button, share if you'd like, or know somebody who might enjoy these videos. And happy spring, everybody. And I will look forward to seeing you again here real soon, back on Cavalcade of Food. Bye for now.